Two modern air superiority starfighters go head-to-head today, as the Broadsword from Halo 4 takes on the T-70 X-Wing as first introduced in Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. My name is EckhartsLadder. I run a YouTube channel that covers Star Wars, Halo, and other science fiction. Spacedock has allowed me to make a video for you guys, and will also be putting a video up on my channel. There will be a link in the description, so make sure you guys check that out after you're done here. As for now, let's set the stage for today's matchup. As I mentioned, today we're putting the T-70 X-Wing against the F-41 Exo-Atmospheric Multi-Role Strike Fighter, the Broadsword. I'll give a brief introduction of these two fighters, then compare them in the categories of weaponry, defensive systems, and intangibles. After that, we'll put them head to head, taking a holistic approach and considering every aspect of these two fighters to try to predict which one would win in a one-on-one matchup. As for the rules of the matchup, I like to keep it simple. We're assuming that each one of these vehicles is in its stock form with no special upgrades. We're also assuming that they're being piloted by persons of equal skill. With that being said, let's now take a basic look at the X-Wing. The T-70 is an upgrade from the T-65 X-Wing, which saw use throughout the Galactic Civil War. Although by the time of the sequel trilogy, the T-75 is technically outdated, it's still an incredibly impressive space superiority fighter, which is easily capable of taking on First Order ships one-on-one. The T-65 itself was a hell of a starfighter, and because of it and impressive starfighters like it, the Alliance was able to resist against the Empire, taking advantage of a serious gap in starfighter quality. The T-70 was a serious upgrade over the T-65. I think Spacedock has explained this really well in the past, so I'll let him take it away.
The Incom Frytech T-70 X-Wing functions as the successor to one of the most legendary starfighters in galactic history, and succeeds in seamlessly improving upon the older design of the T-65B without sacrificing any of the classic model's reliability. Taking full advantage of developments in technology following the Galactic Civil War, the T-70 boasts improvements in armor plating, torpedo loadout, sublight acceleration, and subspace communication. The ship was brought into service after the Battle of Jakku, and served as the mainline fighter craft of the New Republic for many years.
Going into the T-70 is the F-41 Broadsword. As a cousin to the UNSC's Longsword multi-role fighter and the Short Sword bomber, the Broadsword, like the X-Wing, existed as a space superiority fighter, made to dominate Covenant starships in one-on-one combat. As did most post-war UNSC vessels, the Broadsword was unique when compared to the Short Sword and the Longsword in that it had regenerative energy shielding. So, how do these two ships stack up? Let's first look at weaponry. We'll start first with the Broadsword, and the Broadsword used traditional ballistics-based weaponry. Its main weapon was an autocannon which fired 35mm projectiles. It has two of these weapons, each which is likely as powerful as the weapons found on the UNSC Sabre, in fact perhaps even more so, but less powerful than those found on the Longsword, which is a larger ship. In addition, the ship also has a double missile delivery system. The ship's missile capacity has never been addressed, but it must be relatively high because the missiles are fired in bursts. There does seem to be a fairly rudimentary lock-on system. We never really fight any moving targets in the Halo 4 level in which the Broadsword appears, so we don't see the actual maneuverability of the missiles, but it does take some time for the ship to acquire a target, and for the missile lock-on to actually be achieved, that connection has to be maintained. That being said, the missiles themselves do appear to be fairly powerful and are easily capable of destroying Forerunner defense systems. T-70 X-Wing is armed in a completely different way. Instead of using conventional projectile-based weapons, T-70 X-Wing's main guns are laser cannons. Specifically, the ship has 4 cannons, one at the end of each one of its wings, each which has seen upgrades in both power and firing rate when compared to previous X-Wing models. It's hard to say exactly how powerful these laser cannons were, but the T-65 from decades earlier had enough power to rock the surface of the Death Star when the pilots performed strafing runs. A single volley of the T-70's cannons is easily enough to take down the shielded First Order TIE fighter that it often encounters. In addition, the X-Wing also had an ordnance launcher which could be used to carry a variable payload. Typically, I think proton torpedoes would have been taken along. These weapons are extremely powerful, easily enough to take down an enemy starfighter, and capable of inflicting massive damage on hard targets. The firepower of the T-70 seems to be so great that during the attack on Starkiller Base, the Resistance opted to only use X-Wings, foregoing Y-Wings, unlike the Rebel Alliance during the attack on the first Death Star. Adding to the deadliness of the X-Wing were advanced targeting computers and sensors, along with an astromech droid which could help optimize ship systems. It was very difficult to escape an X-Wing that had you as a target, not only due to the ship's insane maneuverability, but also because an X-Wing's proton torpedoes were able to lock onto targets. I'm going to give the weaponry advantage to the X-Wing. I think the weapons are a good deal more powerful than those found on the broadsword. I think the lock-on capabilities of the proton torpedo offers quite a serious advantage, and really having 4 laser cannons is better than having 2 auto cannons. And that's not to say anything about the X-Wing's variable fire modes, which give the ship a good degree of versatility. Next we have defensive systems, and I'm only going to go over this one very quickly because it is hard to actually quantify something like shielding. Both ships had what appears to be a very powerful shield, able to withstand a salvo of whatever was being shot at them by enemy fighters. The broadsword appears to be especially durable. We see that it tanks various shots from Forerunner point defense weapons, but it's hard to tell how much of that can actually be chalked up to gameplay balancing. The X-Wing was fairly durable, but in my opinion that ship did put a bit more focus on speed rather than defense. But its advanced sensor systems, along with the presence of an astromech droid, do help even the odds. I'm going to call this category a tie for both ships. Finally, we have intangibles, and this is basically anything not covered by the previous 2 sections. The first and most obvious thing to cover here is speed and maneuverability. This is also kind of difficult because we only really see the broadsword in action during the events of Halo 4. However, just generally when you look at space warfare in the Halo universe and compare it to the Star Wars universe, there are some pretty obvious differences. In Star Wars, starfighters fight like World War II era fighter planes. They dip and they weave, they do barrel rolls, they move with incredible speed and ease. Halo is a bit more traditional, and the ships fight more like fighter planes, flying at their targets, delivering payloads, and then leaving. Even when the broadsword does do aerial maneuvers, it doesn't do so with the same speed and effectiveness as something like an X-Wing. And although the ship is fast, and it does have a speed boost, we never see it match the speed of an X-Wing either. Starship size should also be considered, and the X-Wing has a much smaller target profile than the broadsword. The broadsword is not only quite a deal longer and wider than the X-Wing, but also significantly less elegant and more bulky. With that being said, let's take a look at the matchup. The first thing that I know some of you are probably thinking and have perhaps already commented is that the X-Wing won't be able to stop the munitions-based weapon of the broadsword. That, however, is untrue. The Star Wars universe, and the X-Wing in particular, makes use of Deflector Shielding. Deflector Shielding has 2 component parts, ray shielding and particle shielding. Particle shielding, as the name suggests, is capable of stopping projectiles. With that out of the way, I think it's clear that the X-Wing has quite a bit of an advantage. First of all, we have weaponry systems. 4 guns are better than 2, and in my mind, even one of the laser cannons on the X-Wings outputs more power than the guns on the broadsword. And that's just partially because Star Wars is science fantasy, and tech-wise is a bit further along than what we see in most of the Halo universe. I think the tracking capabilities of the proton torpedo are also a bit more impressive, which, if all else were equal, would give the X-Wing a pretty big advantage. However, all else is not equal. As I said, the broadsword has a larger target profile, and in my opinion is slower and less maneuverable than the X-Wing. I think the X-Wing will have no problem getting behind the UNSC ship and blasting it quite quickly. I am 100% willing to accept that the broadsword may have stronger shielding than that we see on the X-Wing. It is quite a bit larger, it may output more energy, and we see it tank shots pretty impressively from Forerunner point defense systems. However, it's going to have a really hard time hitting the X-Wing, and I think the X-Wing on the other hand will have absolutely no problem damaging the broadsword. I think the T-65 would have had no problem with the broadsword, and I think the T-70 just absolutely stomps the UNSC ship. All in all, I give this battle to the X-Wing, and I think it wins 9.5 times out of 10. The only chance I'm giving the broadsword is if it's able to somehow hit the X-Wing with a salvo of its missiles, perhaps if their lock-on capability is better than I'm anticipating, or if its main cannon is stronger than I'm anticipating. But I really don't think that either of those scenarios are very likely. Anyway, that's the matchup, with the Star Wars X-Wing coming out on top over Halo's broadsword fighter. But that's just my opinion. I'm going to ask Spacedock to put a poll in the upper right hand corner where you guys can vote on who you think would take this matchup. Also, make sure to comment down below on who you think would win, and let me know if I missed something, if you think I did a good job, and if you think the X-Wing would have been able to beat the broadsword. If you guys enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more verses, top 5s, or other videos, make sure to check out my channel at EckhartsLadder. Also, if you're frustrated that you're missing your Friday Spacedock video, don't worry, he's posted a video on my channel. I'm sure there will be a link down in the description. Anyways, thank you for watching, guys. Thank you again to Spacedock for letting me speak to your audience. This has been EckhartsLadder. May the Force be with you.